To Nigeria now, where unknown gunmen have kidnapped around 30 students in the northwest state of Kaduna. This is the fourth mass school abduction in Nigeria since December.
Around 30 students have been kidnapped from a forestry college in the northwest Nigerian state of Kaduna, according to the state security commissioner on Friday. It's the fourth mass school abduction in the country since December. The Federal College of Forestry Mechanization sits on the outskirts of Kaduna City, a region where banditry has festered for years. Kaduna State Security Commissioner said that an armed gang attacked the college at around 11:30 p.m. local time on Thursday. He said that the army rescued some 180 people in the early hours of Friday, but that, quote, about 30 students, a mix of males and females, are yet to be accounted for. One local resident said he'd heard sporadic gunshots, which he initially thought were military exercises from the nearby Nigerian Defence Academy. The trend of abduction from boarding schools was started by the jihadist group Boko Haram, but it has since been taken up by armed criminal gangs seeking ransom. Military and police attempts to tackle the gangs have had little success so far. Many worry that authorities are exacerbating the situation by letting kidnappers go unpunished, paying them off or providing incentives.
For more on this story, I'm now joined by a senior researcher in the Lake Chad Basin program at the Institute for Security Studies in Dakar, Senegal, Dr. Akinola Olojo. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So it's becoming quite alarming, the rate at which these abductions and kidnappings are taking place now. It's almost as if Nigeria has become quite anarchic.
It's really unfortunate. We've had a series of abductions. The ones that make the headlines globally are the ones, obviously, we've been hearing about since December in Kankara in the northwest of Nigeria. And then there were about 2 or 3 other ones in February this year. And then the most recent one, which just got reported earlier in the early hours of today. But, we have several other isolated or seemingly isolated abduction incidents that have occurred, in between, and even prior to the one that happened in December. So there are quite a number of these cases happening. And sometimes, they might not get, the kind of, publicity or attention. And when it, really gets that attention, that's when we all remember that there is a problem. The problem has been there for quite a while. And I think it's quite significant because Nigeria actually signed up to what we call the Safe Schools Declaration back in 2015, which was just a year after the mass abduction in Chibok in 2014. And that declaration really has, a focus on even the gendered impacts of these incidents, and among other things, the fact that, we have 100 countries, including Nigeria, that have endorsed this declaration, and that Nigeria itself is going to, is expected that Nigeria will actually host, the 4th International Conference on the Safe Schools Declaration this year. So it's a quite, significant thing that has happened, and it really puts Nigeria in the spotlight.
Why is it continuing to happen? Are the authorities allowing it? Are they encouraging it by the way they're dealing with it? Why does it continue and escalate?
Quite a number of reasons. One is that there's an apparent lack of, a sense of urgency. Even the reaction, to these incidents, it's almost like it has become the norm. That's the first thing, the lack of a sense of urgency in treating this issue as something that is a major problem, a systemic problem. That is one. The second thing has to do with accountability. Now, there are those who have been actually implicated in these incidents, some who have been arrested over the years, but then, it sort of stops there, and we don't quite see, the criminal justice system or even, the rule of law running its full course. And, that accountability is also something which, it's reflected on several levels. You have, the local, state, and the federal levels of leadership that also need to be held to account for what is happening. You have members of the National Assembly who are actually elected representatives of the different local government areas where these incidents are happening. And this is where they need to come in and actually take a stance and work with the security agencies and all those who are supposed to enhance civilian protection.
All right, so lack of accountability can almost suggest that there are people on the side of the authorities that may be complicit because they're the ones that can stop accountability taking place.
There is a lot of, vagueness in terms of even, the identities of those who have been, found complicit. We hear bandits, we hear, abductors, and things like that. But surely, when we have a case or cases where hundreds of individuals are being, lifted from communities wholesale over a period of hours, in some cases, it tells us something. There must be someone or some groups within the communities themselves who are probably, aware of what is happening, but maybe because of the fear of reporting this, or perhaps the fact that there are already, some challenges of trust between communities and the leaders of these communities that sort of feeds into this cycle, and it keeps repeating itself. So when we speak of even enhancing civilian protection or even calling for accountability, there also has to be trust that needs to be built between citizens and those who are governed. And I must add something as well. I think Nigerians are actually aware of, the seriousness of this issue of accountability, because if you remember last year, in October last year, there was the hashtag EndSARS protest, where we saw millions of Nigerians take to the streets and millions more online. And the whole idea behind that protest was to call for greater accountability of the leadership, to call for accountability of the security agencies, police brutality and so on. They're all linked together. But we saw what happened with the aftermath of the protests and what has happened since then.
What is it about this part of the country, the northwestern and central part of Nigeria, that has made itself more vulnerable than other parts of the country for this kind of activity?
Actually, Peter, it's a problem which actually cuts across, the entire federation, even, just recently as well. There's another state outside the northern region of Nigeria, where there was another abduction, incident that took place. But in the north of Nigeria, which is obviously where you have the Boko Haram crisis, there are quite, acute, vulnerabilities, socioeconomic, gaps, and this high level of absolute and relative poverty, when you compare to other parts of the country. There are governance gaps, and this has lingered for decades. And it explains why you have, obviously, even the Boko Haram crisis itself, which took quite a while before it got to this stage, but now it's, the full-blown insurgency we're witnessing, but it's something which took a while, to build up to this point. So the northern region has these gaps. And again, it goes back to the point about the leadership in that region of the country and even at the federal level. And the fact that, the president, interestingly, is actually from the northern part of Nigeria. And in fact, last year, he was visiting one of the northern states, Katsina, his own state. And while he was there was a mass abduction that took place. So there is a lot, that really shocks one, with what is happening. It's really something that, it's really of great concern.
I know that some type of agreement had been signed with bandits and the authorities to try and settle this issue, but we almost know how the script is going to end. These abductees, they're not going to die, but money will change hands and they'll be released. And this, I guess, is part of the issue now, that nobody's shocked anymore because they know the process is going to play out in a certain way. Honestly,
Peter, it almost appears that way, that it's almost business as usual. And there's this expectation that when the abductions happen, there'll be some form of, ransom paid. And we've seen that happen on many occasions. But then, when we talk of negotiation, or even trying to dialogue, I think the lens through which we must understand dialogue must be wider. I think what the government really needs to do is to expand the focus of dialogue beyond engaging with these groups. These are criminal groups. they need to be held to account. So dialogue in this context should actually be with the citizens, with civilians who are actually affected by this problem. And it goes back to what I raised earlier about trust. And trust can only be built when there is dialogue. So the dialogue that needs to take place is the one between the government or the leaders of these communities and the citizens or the communities that are affected. And when that happens, or when we can have that sustainable conversation between the governed and those who are governing, then we can begin to talk of trust. We can begin to talk of collaboration. We can even build collaboration between communities and the security agencies, between communities and the justice sector. And it's all, it's all connected. It's a whole of society sort of dialogue, that needs to take place.
All right, Dr. Olojo, that's where we're going to leave it. Thanks very much indeed. Your insights are always greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Peter, for having me.
All right, that was Dr. Ojolo, who's speaking to us about the situation in Nigeria. 30 more people abducted, kidnapped, but it's starting to look like a script that we recognize quite well. And we'll see what happens in the coming days. But just to share some news with you, Minneapolis, the city of Minneapolis has reached a $27 million settlement with George Floyd's family in a wrongful death lawsuit. He was killed last May, and that caused outrage across the world. So they've settled $27 million the family will receive. We'll have more for you after the break.